The Cold War. For almost 50 years, it was the defining conflict of our time. It was a clash of ideologies, economies, and empires. We remember the public side of this war, the brinkmanship, the missile gap, the leaders who held the fate of the planet in their hands. We remember the walls that went up and the walls that came down. But this wasn't the only war. A second, secret war was fought in the shadows, in the quiet alleys of divided cities, in the sterile silence of code-breaking rooms, and inside the minds of men and women forced to make impossible choices. This is not the story of James Bond. This is the story of the real spies. The ones who never came home. The ones whose greatest victories were never celebrated, and whose names were deliberately erased from history. Tonight, we unseal the files. This is the story of the forgotten spies. The history of the Cold War, as we know it, is a history of visible deterrence, of armies massed in Europe, of a nuclear stalemate that promised mutual assured destruction. But beneath this fragile peace, the real currency was information. Who was building what? Who, inside the enemy's walls, could be trusted? Who could be turned? The CIA, the KGB, Britain's MI6, these agencies waged a relentless, invisible battle for secrets. Born from the ashes of World War II, the two new superpowers regarded each other with pathological distrust. Stalin saw conspiracy in every Western move. Washington was gripped by a paranoid fear of communist expansion. This shadow war wasn't just about collection. It was about placing a dagger in the enemy's heart. It was about preventing or starting the next war. It was, ultimately, about collapsing the other system from within. To win, they needed assets on the inside. But recruiting and running a spy is the most dangerous game in the world. The prize was seeing things before they happened. But failing meant facing the consequences head-on. Discovery was. Now, let's meet three people who will show us the real story behind this secret war. First, there's this Polish intelligence colonel who outed more communist spies than almost anyone else ever. But the CIA buried his story because he claimed to be the last living heir to the Russian throne. Then there's this Soviet engineer who was driven not by money, but by feeling disillusioned and captivated by Western rock music. He gave America its biggest military advantage, but he paid for it with his life. And finally, there's this woman, who colleagues described as looking and acting like Agatha Christie's Miss Marple, navigated the dangerous politics of Moscow, and became the highest-ranking female spy in British history. They lived in a world of secret meetings, hidden messages, and coded words. A world where even a tiny slip-up, a careless word, or a moment of bad luck could mean disappearing forever. Their stories were locked away, classified as top secret for decades. Not just to keep their methods safe. They were sealed to hide their mistakes, to bury their embarrassments, and to protect a fragile, official story of victory. So, why were they forgotten? Because in the Shadow War, the most valuable thing, and the most dangerous thing, is the truth. Being a spy is a life of division, a fractured identity, a loyalty to one country, while working for another. For the forgotten, this split would eventually consume them. Warsaw, Poland, 1958. The heart of the Eastern Bloc. Inside Polish intelligence, Colonel Michał Goleniewski felt like the walls were closing in. He had always believed in communism, but Stalin's cruelty and the Red Army's crushing of the Hungarian uprising in 1956 had broken his heart. He started playing a dangerous game. So, Goleniewski, using the codename Sniper, started sending anonymous letters to the CIA in West Berlin, offering up secrets. The CIA, being cautious, was a bit skeptical. But then, the information started pouring in. It was like a flood. Goleniewski, being in a high-up position, had access to everything. He handed the West a list of KGB moles hiding deep inside their own governments. He even exposed George Blake, a top MI6 officer who was actually a Soviet double agent. He also identified spies in the West German government, the British Admiralty, and even in NATO. In total, over 1,600 communist agents were identified because of him. The damage to the Soviet network was huge. The CIA called him one of their most valuable assets ever. In 1961, as the KGB got closer to him, Goleniewski, His wife and his mistress made a daring escape to the West. He was secretly celebrated as a hero. And then, the story took a turn. Once safe in America, Michał Goleniewski made a new claim that was so wild, it could have ruined everything. He announced that he was actually the Tsarevich, Alexei Romanov, the son of Tsar Nicholas II, who somehow survived the execution of his family in 1918. The CIA was shocked. Their star defector was, in their eyes, a crazy person. One man be so right and so devastatingly wrong. As his espionage just a delusion. As his royal claim a strange cover story. Oh my goodness, the situation was so tough. The intelligence he shared was spot on. It was still helping them track down spies. But his personal total disaster for his public image. The CIA was in a real pickle. Some were saying he should be given a medal for his service, while others thought any connection to him was a no-go. In the end, the CIA had to do what they thought was best. They took his intelligence, and, well, let's just say they didn't give him the support he needed. Goleniewski spent the rest of his days in the shadows in New York, writing letters that went nowhere, trying to prove he was royalty, but the very agency he had served didn't care. He was forgotten. Not because he didn't do his job, but because his story was too complicated to understand. If Goleniewski's story is about losing his identity, Adolf Tolkachev's is about struggling with his conscience. It was 1977 in Moscow. Leonid Brezhnev's Soviet Union was super powerful, but it was also stuck in a rut. Adolf Tolkachev wasn't some big shot colonel. He was a smart, but regular, electronics engineer. He worked in a top-secret Soviet military design bureau. Tolkachev was feeling pretty down. His wife's parents had been hurt by Stalin. He didn't like how corrupt and unfair the Soviet system was. He secretly listened to Western rock music and read books that were banned by the government, like Solzhenitsyn's. He decided to take action. He didn't wait for someone to recruit him. He took a huge risk and went up to American diplomats right on the streets of Moscow. He even left notes on their cars. For a whole year, the CIA didn't believe him, worried it was another KGB trick. But Tolkachev was determined. And guess what? In 1979, they finally took a chance. What he shared was mind-blowing. Tolkachev was a key designer for the Soviet Union's next-gen fighter jets, the MiG-29 and Su-27. He gave the CIA all the avionics, radar systems, and weapon research for years to come. He didn't want any money for ages, saying he was doing it for the sake of the Russian people. The CIA called him CKSPHERE and even nicknamed him the billion-dollar spy. His info helped the United States see the new Soviet fighters, saving tons of money on R&D and keeping American air power strong for the next 20 years. It was a huge intelligence win that totally changed the military game. For 6 years, Tolkachev was living on the edge. He took photos of tons of documents at night, met with his handlers in disguise, and dodged the KGB at every turn. But his downfall wasn't because of the KGB's skills, it was because someone inside the CIA betrayed him. A former CIA trainee named Edward Lee Howard, who was upset about being fired, sold Tolkachev's info to the Soviets for money. In 1985, Adolf Tolkachev was arrested. After a year of questioning, he was shot in the back of the head. He was forgotten because celebrating him would mean admitting that his death was a huge mistake. While Tolkachev and Goleniewski's stories are sadly remembered, let's shine a light on a third spy whose tale is a testament to triumph. Daphne Park arrived in Moscow in 1954, as a diplomat, officially serving as the second secretary at the British Embassy. But behind the scenes, she was working for MI6. In the tightly controlled and suspicious atmosphere of Moscow, Park had the perfect disguise. As a woman in a predominantly male world, she blended right in. A colleague once remarked that she looked and acted like Miss Marple, the wise detective from Agatha Christie's books. The KGB didn't notice her. They saw a seemingly harmless diplomat hosting embassy parties and participating in knitting circles. They didn't realize she was a brilliant intelligence officer, orchestrating a network of agents, building connections, and smuggling information. Daphne Park was a trailblazer. She bravely served on the front lines of the Cold War, working in Hanoi during the Vietnam War, and in the Congo during its brutal civil war. In the Congo, she was once captured by rebels and locked in the trunk of a car. In Hanoi, she managed operations amidst the bombings. She didn't just survive, she thrived. In a world where sexism was rampant, she shattered the highest glass ceiling. Daphne Park became one of MI6's first female controllers, one of the service's most senior operational directors. So, she not more widely remembered? Exactly because she succeeded. Daphne Park's life wasn't a thrilling tale of capture, betrayal, or scandal. Her victories stayed under wraps, and her name never leaked. She played the game of shadows and emerged victorious, retiring with honor and later becoming a baroness. Daphne Park's story teaches us that the most successful spies are often the ones we never hear about. The stories of Goleniewski, Tolkachev, and Park were kept hidden for decades. So, hidden history finally the answer isn't in a spy, but in a project. A project so secret, even President Truman wasn't aware of its existence. It was called the Venona Project. Starting in World War II, a small team of American codebreakers embarked on the daunting task of cracking the Soviet Union's most secure intelligence cables. It was a slow, meticulous process. For years, they stared at meaningless strings of numbers. But in 1946, they stumbled upon a weakness. A single, crucial error. The Soviets had, in some cases, reused their one-time pads. Suddenly, the messages began to reveal themselves. What Venona uncovered was terrifying. It showed that the Soviet Union wasn't just an external adversary, but an internal threat. It identified the atomic spies Klaus Fuchs, David Greenglass, and Julius and Ethel Rosenberg who had stolen America's nuclear secrets. It unmasked dozens of other agents hidden deep within the U.S. government. The project remained one of the most closely guarded secrets of the Cold War. It was finally declassified in 1995. Venona was the game changer. It was the undeniable proof that the Shadow War was real. Its release pushed other agencies, like the CIA and MI6, to finally dust off their own forgotten histories. But these sealed records also unveiled the mind-blowing complexity of the secret war. They showed that for every operation, there was a counter-operation. Take the Berlin Tunnel, for example. Back in 1953, the CIA and MI6 kicked off Operation Gold, a truly amazing engineering feat. They dug a tunnel, 450 meters long, from West Berlin into the Soviet sector, to tap 3 crucial KGB communication cables. For 11 months, they listened in, recording thousands of hours of conversations. It seemed like an incredible intelligence victory. But the whole operation was a total sham. The KGB had known about the tunnel before the first shovel ever hit the ground. Their mole inside MI6, the very same George Blake who was later exposed by the madman Goleniewski, had warned them. The Soviets allowed the tunnel to be built. They fed the West a carefully crafted mix of useless information and deliberate disinformation, all while protecting their real secrets. And most importantly, they protected their prized asset, George Blake. The Shadow War was a wild, mirrored landscape, where forgotten spies on one side neutralized the forgotten operations of the other. So, these forgotten spies, their stories were quite different. The madman, the martyr, and the silent professional. Adolf Tolkachev's sacrifice gave America a significant military edge, one that analysts believe might have helped prevent a hot war by making Soviet aggression too costly. Michał Goleniewski's data, despite his later delusions, surgically removed a generation of Soviet assets from the West, blinding the KGB for years. And Daphne Park's quiet success showed that the most effective work was often done away from the spotlight. Hey, guess what? Espionage has totally evolved. We're no longer fighting in trenches like back in the Cold War, but instead, we're dealing with fiber optic cables and satellite uplinks. And get this, our enemies are often just algorithms or lines of code, not people. But here's the thing, the human side of things, that's still the same. The reasons why someone might betray their country, or serve its secret, those are timeless. It's all about conscience, greed, revenge, ideology, or just a simple belief in a better future. Their names aren't on war memorials, and their victories and defeats are locked away in vaults, behind top secret stamps. They're like the footnotes of history, the ghosts in the archives. But the world we live in today, the balance of power, the tech we have, and the peace we take for granted was shaped, forever, by their invisible hand. It was a history written by the spies who were never remembered,